Rewatch Podcast presents the Alien vs. Predator Rewatch. Join us each week as we discuss another film in the Alien, Prometheus, Predator, and Alien vs. Predator franchise. Send your feedback to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/rewatchpodcast or follow us on Twitter @rewatchpod. Today we're discussing Aliens, starring Sigourney Weaver, Carrie Henn, Michael Biehn, Paul Reiser, Lance Hendrickson, William Hope, and Bill Paxton, directed by James Cameron. Welcome back to the Rewatch Podcast. I'm Corey, and alright, sweethearts, what are you waiting for? Breakfast in bed?
And what do they mean they cut the power, man? How could they cut the power, man? They're animals.
Oh, man. How you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Good.
Nice to
Can't go past those Bill Paxton lines, right?
Oh man, no way! I watched this last night, and he's so good at it. Anyway, we'll get more into it as we go along.
Yes, yeah. We are at part 2 of our AVP rewatch, and it's Aliens.
I know, it's like what a 1-2 punch! Alien and then Aliens. We've moved into the future, though, haven't we? It's currently 1986, isn't it?
Yes. This is no police academy where you kind of may have a good-ish one and then maybe a bad one. This is good and then good.
Yeah, and I think we spoke about it briefly last week, but like they really took their time, didn't they? Pulling this one out. I mean, 79, 86. I mean, as you mentioned last week, if this was made today, they would have been writing a brand new script for the sequel yesterday. They do not muck around these days with sequels, so it's actually quite refreshing seeing them kind of take their time and making sure they get it right and get the right filmmaker and all that kind of stuff, and not treat the franchise poorly. Like they really do treat it with respect.
Let's do the trailer.
Just tell me one thing, Burke. You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back, but to wipe them out.
That's the plan.
All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! Get on the ready line, Marine! Get something to die! Get on the ready line!
Get your light up here.
Keep back, don't scare.
Movement! Talk to me, Hudson!
I got signals. I got readings in front and behind.
There's nothing back here.
Look, I'm telling you, there's something moving and it ain't us.
Get them out of there!
How could they cut the power, man? They're animals.
There's movement all over the place!
5 meters, man. 4.
Aliens. This time, it's war.
Okay, Aliens. Now, Aliens was eagerly anticipated by fans following the success of Alien, which was released in 1979. And Aliens was actually released in North America on July 18, 1986, and August 29 in the United Kingdom. My birthday, might I add. In North America, the film opened with an average opening gross of $6,995 and a weekend gross of $10 million. It was number 1 at the North American box office for 4 4 consecutive weeks, grossing $85.1 million, and Aliens was actually the 7th highest grossing film of 1986 in North America. The film's worldwide total gross has been stated as high as $180 million, making Aliens one of the highest grossing R-rated films of all time.
Nice. And of course, its budget was estimated between $17 and $18 million. So it got its budget back 100-fold.
I know. And like these are just like estimates. I mean, as we kind of mentioned as well last week, finding accurate figures about gross box office and whatnot back in the 80s is not that easy. You get like wildly kind of different kind of figures and, you know, big ranging kind of numbers. And Aliens is kind of no different. But I think it's very safe to say that this was a ginormous hit, both at the movies and also like on home video as well. I mean, don't forget, these are the days when things got released on home video. First of all, they went to the rental store, and the owners of the rental stores were paying literally hundreds of dollars for each of those tapes, and they were rented out for, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And then when it came home on video, I mean, those videos, like even back in 1986, it was $30, $40 for a tape, wasn't it? It wasn't cheap.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I love the idea that they say that this is one of the highest grossing R-rated films of all time, right? There's this whole mentality that studios need to make films for the teenage crowd and sort of aim for that 15-ish sort of, you know, demographic, because that way we'll get more money. And you release a movie like Aliens, and it does gangbusters in 1986, yet this mentality still remains. And then earlier this year, 2016, they released Deadpool, and Deadpool outgrosses all of Marvel's films.
Yeah, it was a huge, ginormous hit that kind of, I think it made close to like, you know, $750 million or something like that. It was some huge amount of money. I mean, it actually made domestic in the States $363 million and foreign box office $419 for a grand total of $782. I don't quite know why they don't target more of their films like this. I mean, a lot of them could kind of do. I mean, God knows Batman versus Superman or even Suicide Squad could have done with a healthy R rating, and it probably would have helped the final film as well, you know, because they kind of watered these things down a bit, don't they?
It's just that mentality of, oh, we need to target that 15 mid-teens audience that just ruins everything. Go for that hard eye. Make it for the people who want it. We will come out in droves.
You realize that the people that have money to spend are not necessarily the 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. I mean, don't get me wrong, mum and dad will drive those kids to the movies and help them out see whatever they want to see, but like the people that are seeing these films 2, 3, 4 times are the 20-somethings.
Let's get into some other trivia. We were talking last week about, you know, how real everything felt. You know, it felt very natural a lot of the time. And James Cameron wanted to sort of keep that kind of feel, even though he was sort of changing up the genre a bit. It moved away from, you know, a straight horror suspense into this military action sort of bent. But he wanted to keep that sense of realism and natural conversation between people. So when it came to filming the introduction scenes of all the Marines, he actually shot that last, once the whole cast was really familiar with each other and they had been through the experience of making the film, just to sort of make it feel more natural at the beginning that these were people who knew each other. I thought that's a great way for a director to, you know, sort of think about that ahead of time.
Well, it's smart filmmaking, isn't it? Because he realizes what's kind of important, and the camaraderie amongst the crew is crucial to the audience kind of believing that particular scene. And it actually also kind of worked in reverse as well, because I think I read some trivia where the main crew actually did like a boot camp a few weeks prior to the start of filming, with real kind of soldiers kind of putting them through their scenes and giving them that camaraderie straight away. But I think he intentionally withheld Sigourney Weaver earlier on because he wanted there to be like not that familiarity straight away, because the start of the film, Ripley is very much secluded from the rest of the team and is kind of introduced at the 11th hour by the Paul Reiser character trying to like endlessly kind of convince her to kind of go back to LV-426, which Sigourney Weaver desperately doesn't want to do. But yeah, he kind of withheld her from that training so that they wouldn't have that camaraderie, that there was a little bit of tension that was meant to be there, that was clearly in the script. So I actually found that quite interesting. It's very clever filmmaking. Even though he's a great filmmaker, this was by no means an easy production, though. I had the pleasure of watching, there's a great box set, like a Blu-ray box set called Alien Quadrilogy, which I bought years years and years ago, and it's got all the Alien films on Blu-ray. But on disc 5, there is 3-hour makings of all the Alien films. Each of them are 3 hours, and it's really comprehensive, and they're very interesting. And this film really did suffer a little bit from James Cameron trying to like be a perfectionist and pushing the crew to the limits and demanding like top quality from everyone around him. And I know that he clashed quite heavily with the film's composer, James Horner, because there was an interview where composer James Horner felt that James Cameron had given him so little time to write a musical score for the film that he was actually forced to cannibalize previous scores he had done, such as elements from his Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Star Trek III, The Search for Spock scores.
And of course, James Cameron is known for having very strong female leads in his films. You look at his movies, Aliens, Terminator, especially Terminator 2, even Titanic had a strong female lead. Avatar. So, yeah, he's very well known for this. And actually, Sigourney Weaver was nominated as Best Actress in the Oscars for this film. And this was the first time ever that an actress in an action role had been nominated for Best Actress. So it goes to show that James Cameron knows how to make a strong female character.
But apparently Sigourney Weaver was actually very hesitant to reprise her role of Ripley, especially because Cameron had cut the scene where Burke had brought Ripley the news of just missing the death of her character's daughter. She had actually rejected numerous offers from Fox Studios to do any sequels, fearing that her character would be poorly written and a subpar sequel could only hurt the legacy of the now classic Alien film. And I'm pretty sure that film was considered a classic, even in 1987 or 86 when this came out. Like, it's just, that film was bona fide Hollywood royalty, a great film. However, Weaver was actually so impressed by the high quality of James Cameron's script, specifically the strong focus on Ripley and the mother-daughter bond between her character and Newt, and the incredible precision with which Cameron wrote her character, that she actually finally agreed to do the film. And let's be thankful, because she's a star, isn't she? But by 1986, I mean, she obviously did Alien. She had done Ghostbusters by that stage, and I mean, that was a huge hit. So Sigourney Weaver was kind of doing the business big time in the 80s, wasn't she?
Yeah, and it's funny you should bring that up, because there is actually a deleted scene in Aliens, which you can see in the director's cut of this. And I said last week, I think the director's cut is a bit overindulgent, but if there's one scene I really like, it's the scene where Ripley finds out that her daughter has actually passed away, because of course she was in stasis for 57 years.
Yeah.
So by the time she gets back, her daughter had passed away. And when she looks at the picture of her daughter, the picture is actually of her mother.
I know,
Elizabeth
yeah.
Inglis. Her own mother played the image of her daughter, of course, grown old and passed away.
I do agree with you. I actually, for this review tonight, I actually did watch the longer cut. I watched the 2 hours 34 minute, the director's cut, I should say, and I do agree. Like, Cameron states pretty clearly that he actually prefers this cut. He thinks that there's more tension amongst the crew, and there's more tension with the alien and various other kind of things. But I do agree. I do think it's a little laboured. It could be a bit tighter, specifically the start of the film. It does feel a bit long-winded, doesn't it?
So that's why I usually recommend just seeing the theatrical version. But there is a couple of good scenes that were cut and later restored. But even James Cameron said that he never even showed Aliens to test audiences, which is a common practice for studios. But yeah, he just did no audience testing whatsoever. He actually kind of intentionally sort of slowed down the editing process until about a week before it was to be released, in order to avoid having to do test audience screenings. You can look at a director and think, well, maybe they're a bit up themselves for wanting to do that. But hey, man, when you're someone like James Cameron, I think you can probably get away with it. Whatever he's going to deliver is probably going to bring you some box office gold.
Yeah, but at the time, he didn't have that weight about him. He'd only made the Terminator film in 1984, and then I think didn't he make like Piranha or something like that?
Well, Piranha was before Terminator.
So
I think Aliens was his follow-up to Terminator.
Yeah, that's right. But I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that he didn't have that Avatar weight, Terminator 2 weight about him, where he just, I mean, these days, James Cameron, I mean, he's making 3 Avatar sequels, like, in a row. Like, it's just balls to the wall, isn't it? Like, it's just total confidence in kind of knowing exactly what he's doing. And I mean, you can't blame him. I mean, regardless of what you think of Avatar, it was a huge film, a ginormous film, and pretty much all his films are event films. But in 1986, he didn't have the same clout, and I'm sure from the studio's perspective, they would have been a little nervous, especially seeing that there was controversy behind the scenes. And another thing too is that the character of Hicks was actually meant to be played by James Remar. Now, James Remar is a face that you will all know, and I can actually see him in this role. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Oh, he's Dexter's dad. He was in the Warriors.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. He's Dexter's dad, and I can see him pretty clearly playing the role of Hicks, and he had to actually drop out for whatever reason. I think in the documentary that I watched the other day, he actually mentioned that this was a pretty heavy stage of his life. He was actually fired from the production because he was busted for possession of drugs, and he actually said that this was a period of his life where he said he had developed a terrible drug problem. Remar still appeared actually in the finished film, however. He's actually seen for one shot when the Marines enter the alien nest, because he is seen from behind wearing the same armor as Michael Biehn, and it's actually impossible to tell the difference between the two actors in that particular shot. So happy shot hunting, people. I doubt you'll see him, but that's okay.
We also talked about Bill Paxton and all of his great lines in this movie, and Bill Paxton actually vehemently says that he came up with most of the lines himself. He kind of just ad-libbed the whole thing. He also apparently was continuously apologizing to Carrie Henn, who played Newt, because his character Hudson has to swear a lot in scenes that Carrie Henn is in. And apparently she didn't mind. She in later interviews said that she really didn't understand what most of the swear words were. But yeah, Bill Paxton in this movie, he's the comic relief, really, in a movie that's so full on and so action packed. He's the funny guy.
He's so good too. I think he's fantastic, but we'll get more into that a bit later. There was actually talk of bringing H.R. Geiger back for the second movie to do more design work, but James Cameron actually decided against it because there was only one major design to be done, that of the Alien Queen, which Cameron had actually already done some drawings of. So I actually think, don't misunderstand, this is a wonderful film, but I think it maybe could have done with a little bit of H.R. Geiger design work. I think I would have liked to have seen him come back to come up with some new creatures or some kind of slight alterations or whatever it might have been, because H.R. Geiger's designs are so synonymous with Alien. Like, it's just kind of owns that character in many ways. Like, the design of it is brilliant, and it would have been nice to kind of see him come back for a second hit.
Yeah, well, as it stands, he's kind of already done the groundwork anyway, this being a sequel and all. And well, I guess the last bit of trivia here, I don't think this is ever stated in the film, but apparently it takes place in 2179. So but he's actually thinking what year this is supposed to be. I guess that would make Alien set in the early 22nd century.
And they smoke in the film. Do you think they'll still be smoking in 2179? Oh, sorry. Anyway, should we get into our main discussion?
Let's do it. Okay, so Aliens. We kind of pick up where we left off.
Yeah.
They kind of throw us a curveball, because Ripley, last we saw her, put herself into stasis, hoping to be picked up in about 6 or 7 weeks by the corporation. We cut to this scene of these like robotic arms. I think they're supposed to kind of make you think like they're aliens, the way they kind of swoop in. You see them through this little porthole or something like that. And they break into the ship and uncover Ripley, and she quickly finds out that she has in fact been in stasis for 57 years.
It takes her a while, though, to find out. I mean, there's that scene with Paul Reiser at the start, who is playing like the good guy face of the corporation, trying to like be like Ripley's offsider, and he says something about, do you realize how long you've been away for? And she goes, no, and he goes, has nobody spoken to you about this? And there's that scene where Paul Reiser mad about you and tells her 57 years, and she's just totally shocked, and then it kind of dawns on her that what's happened to a child and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
like I said, in the extended cut they kind of get into this whole thing about her daughter, who was like heavy into charities and things like that, but she had passed away. But really the focus at this point is that the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, who she works for, kind of puts her through the ringer. They want a complete debriefing. She's telling them what happened, aliens attacked, they took out the whole crew, we blew up the ship, it's gone. And they kind of, I guess, sort of subtly make her believe that they could sue her for doing that.
Yeah.
She destroyed a multi-million-dollar vessel. What were you thinking? How dare you?
Yeah, and they kind of really put her through the ringer as to exactly what occurred. And there's that scene where she's in front of the whole board of directors or whoever it is, or the panel, and she's like, what more can I tell you? We've been here for 3.5 hours. Like, doesn't she say something like, I didn't realize people were getting stupider as time goes on, or something like that?
Yeah, and she mentions how they found the alien in the first place with the eggs, and it quickly becomes evident that this place has now been colonized. They call it Exomoon LV-426.
Yep.
And what they're doing there is the inhabitants are terraformers. They've got this like terraforming machine that Weyland-Yutani had sort of spearheaded, and they take it over there and it gets to work terraforming the planet, making the air breathable, all that stuff. And it takes decades and decades. So all these colonists go there and they sort of stay in the space station and keep everything operating for the decades until the moon or until LV-426 is inhabitable.
And the film makes it very clear that LV-426 is this deeply inhospitable, highly kind of dangerous kind of planet, and they cross over to the planet, and there's like what appears to be like the boss at the facility taking orders from everyone and picking up the phone, and someone's out in the wild, if I find something, can I kind of claim it as mine kind of thing? And he says, yes, you can claim it. If you find something, consider it yours kind of thing. And then we kind of cross over to this family. The family is being led by, mum and dad kind of colonists of the Exomoon, and they're in their, what appears to be a car, and they're driving around, and you actually meet Newt and her brother, and the parents are kind of driving along, and they run into what appears to be the same ship that we met in the first Alien film. The parents decide to go exploring. Movie mistake number one, but that's okay. They didn't know any better. They just felt like they found gold, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. And of course they get their faces hugged.
Yeah, and that's all you kind of see. I mean, I think they go off exploring. They come back to the car, and the mum is panicking because the dad has had a facehugger jump at him and kind of buried himself on to the dad. And I think you see Newt screaming, and then you cut back to Earth, or what you consider. I don't even think it is Earth. I couldn't tell. Do they even tell you it's Earth? I can't.
No, I think it's like a space station that's like above Earth.
Yeah, they do, and that's where we kind of meet Ripley again, and it turns out that Ripley has kind of been having nightmares and she can't sleep, and it's this terrible kind of situation. And we meet the Paul Reiser character kind of comes back into it, and he, for whatever reason, is desperate to convince Ripley to join his expedition because they've actually lost contact with Hadley's Hope, which is what the name of the colonizers are, and they want to find out what's going on because there's a lot of money invested in colonizing that moon. So they put a team together, and Paul Reiser's character is desperate to get Ripley involved, isn't he?
It's a cool scene of like trying to talk her into it. And originally she just says no. She managed to get some crap job or something like that she does, and she's having nightmares, but she just says no. Like, if you've lost contact with them, I told you that something was going on there. And whatever's going on, that's your problem now. You deal with it.
Yeah.
And of course, the nightmares persist. So eventually she comes around and says, look, if we're just going there to find out what's going on, and if what I'm saying to you has come about, then we are to destroy them. We're not going to study them. We're not going to bring them back. It's all about destroying them.
Yes.
Then I will go with you.
That's right. And of course, Carter Burke, which is Paul Reiser's character, quickly agrees to all these stipulations. Next thing you know, she's on the USS Sulaco, I should say, and she's actually introduced to the Colonial Marines and the android Bishop, towards whom Ripley is actually initially hostile following her experience with the traitorous Ash aboard the Nostromo. And there's actually a pretty cool scene where Ripley gets very, very upset when she she realizes that Bishop is an android, and she confronts Burke about it and says, "You never told me an android was going to be on this mission. If you did tell me, I wouldn't have come," or something like that, because of her experience on the previous mission with Ash. And then Burke quickly tells Ripley that whatever model that Ash was actually known to have like faults in it, and it's actually no surprise that it actually went a bit crazy.
Bishop, I think, is a very, very different character to Ash. Just his mannerisms, the fact that he's upfront about being an android to begin with, or as he says, he prefers synthetic human. You know, it's a very different characterization. And of course, he lays out the thing that, you know, Ash's model was a bit glitchy, but his new model, like, there's no way that he could harm a human being or by inaction cause harm to come to a human being. He's trying to reassure her, but of course, she's just like, "I don't like androids. Stay the hell away from me, Bishop. That's the end of story. Let's just get in here and do what we got to do."
You know what, though? When I was rewatching this the other day, I think I've got memories of watching this movie when I was a kid, and I remember Bishop having a lot more to do. I watched this yesterday. I was surprised. I mean, he's in it, but he only really comes into play in the last 30-40 minutes of the film, doesn't he?
I think it's that thing of, you know, the fact that Ripley doesn't like him. So, of course, we're not going to see him a lot because, well, quite frankly, she's the lead character and she wants to avoid him. So it's up to him to sort of redeem himself, which I think he does by the end.
Yeah, that's right. And also got that great scene too, like where Ripley's kind of having dinner or whatever it is with the rest of the crew, and Bishop puts his hand on Hudson's hand and they do that knife trick. And I remember always totally being freaked out by that when I saw that back in the day.
Yeah, I would freak out myself, I reckon, if that happened to me.
Yeah, totally. It was just kind of one of those things. And I've kind of got memories of trying to, like, obviously not do that with a knife, but certainly muck around with that. And it was always because of that scene. I think it kind of got stuck into pop culture a little bit, that concept of your hand and that game that they kind of played. Obviously not with a knife, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think we all used to do it with our pens in school, just
Yes.
to see if we could.
Yeah, that's right. So, a dropship actually delivers the expedition for all the Colonial Marines. And maybe just before we go too far, we should maybe talk about the Marines that we kind of meet. There's obviously several of them. I think, like, just talking about casting for a second, I think James Cameron really nailed it with the casting for all of these characters. I think they all do a really great job. From Bill Paxton's Private Hudson to Henriksen as the android Bishop. Obviously, you got Michael Biehn, fresh from Terminator, showing up as Corporal Dwayne Hicks. You've also got a really wonderful Jeanette Goldstein as Vasquez, and she's wonderful, isn't she?
What exactly are we dealing with here?
Ripley?
I'll tell you what I know. We sat down on LV-426. One of our crew members was brought back on board with something attached to his face, some kind of parasite. We tried to get it off. It wouldn't come off. Later, it seemed to come off by itself and die. Kane seemed fine. We were all having dinner, and, it must have laid something inside his throat, some sort of embryo. He started,
Look, man, I only need to know one thing. Where they are.
Joe Vasquez, kick ass.
Anytime, anywhere, man.
Right. Somebody said alien. She thought they said illegal alien and signed up.
Fuck you, man.
Anytime, anywhere.
Are you finished? I hope you're right. I really do.
Yeah, okay, right. Thank you, Ripley. We also have Ripley's report on disk. I suggest you study it.
Because just one of those things managed to wipe out my entire crew in less than 24 hours. And if the colonists have found that ship, then there's no telling how many of them have been exposed. Do you understand?
Anyway, we have it on disk, so you better look at it. Any questions? What is it, Private?
How do I get out of this chicken shit outfit?
You secure that shit, Hudson.
All right. Now listen up. I want this thing to go smooth and by the numbers. I want DCS and tactical database assimilation by 0830. Ordnance loading, weapon strip, and dropship prep details will have 7 hours. Now move it, people.
All right, sweethearts, you heard the man and you know the drill. Assholes and elbows. Hudson, come here. Come here.
they all nail the roles. You kind of believe it. You believe that they're Marines. And like, I mean, I don't know factually if it's correct or if all the lingo is correct, but I certainly believe it. When I'm watching this crew together, I think that they are kind of the army, yeah?
Yeah, and the good thing is that they're a big group, and they've obviously worked together a fair bit as well. So you think, okay, these guys are coming in, they're trained military, they've got the weapons, they've got everything. So we're in safe hands because, of course, we got them, we got the guy leading them, and then there's Carter Burke and Ripley. So when they get down there in the dropship and they cannot find any of the colonists, they're all gone, and we get into this tense scene of them going in to find out what's going on, you know that they are setting up something big to happen here at the beginning.
Yeah, it takes a while for them to kind of get found out. And keep in mind, too, the head of the operation is this very Weasley character, Gorman. And do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, he's
really weak.
Yeah, he's inexperienced. They kind of set that up. They, like, Ripley asked him at one point, like, how many drops have you done? And he goes, 36 simulated.
Yeah, that's right.
This is his first, like, lead. And the fact that this team isn't really under the control of their sergeant, who is, you know, he's the military guy. He's the one who's always getting him into shape. Come on, I love the Corps.
I love that character. I think
but he's not in charge.
He's not in charge. No,
Gorman is.
Gorman is I think his name's Apone, played by Al Matthews, and Lieutenant Gorman's played by William Hope. And you're right, he's clearly the kind of the boss. He's the guy sitting at the command station, leading the giving signals via radio. Like, he's not in there with the troops. He's watching from afar, kind of directing traffic. The crew on this expedition, they actually find, as you said, it's deserted. They can't find anything. I think that it's clear that there was some kind of struggle has taken place, but they're not too sure what's happening. They do find 2 live facehuggers in containment tanks in the medical lab, so which gives the impression that maybe they were there for other reasons. Perhaps they were kind of doing experiments on these creatures. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think pretty much what happened there is what happened in the first Alien movie, ostensibly, right? Larger scale, there's a lot more people at this facility, but we skip over it. We don't see any of that because that's what happened in the first movie.
Yeah.
They come in for the aftermath. The colonists had been studying these things. Of course, one of them had at least attached itself to the father's face.
Yes.
Which you see in the extended cut. And then, of course, hell broke loose. And there's heaps and heaps of aliens, because we learn that there's hundreds of colonists there, women, children, full families of people. So who knows how many aliens there are now if all of them had face huggers put on them. So some of them may have just been extraneously killed, but it's set up that there is more than one. We had one in the first and it killed everybody on that ship. Now we've got hundreds of them.
They've got this great device, though, this technology that I think Hudson's kind of in charge of, where he's got this tracker, which kind of is like a movement tracker that they kind of have, and they use this device to great effect. As the audience, you're always kind of understanding kind of what's happening, and it's always via this tracker. And Hudson's kind of saying stuff like, "There's someone up ahead, man. It's moving. I can see it," and they all kind of go towards it. But as we said, they found these 2 live face huggers, and thanks to this tracker, Hudson actually follows it, and they find this little girl out of nowhere. She's the only survivor that they can see on this station, and it's this little girl named Newt, and I should say her name's actually Rebecca. She's the girl that we met earlier on, whose parents found the derelict alien spacecraft and was attacked by the facehuggers. You don't really know exactly what happened to her parents. You assume they were killed, and you don't know what happened to her brother. The little girl obviously connects immediately. Well, actually not immediately. I mean, it takes a while for Ripley to kind of coax her out of her seclusion, because she's clearly traumatized by what's happened, but somehow she's able to survive this terrible tragedy that's kind of befallen on this station. Like, against all odds, she's survived, and she's alive, and she's a great source of information as well eventually to the Marines as to kind of what happened there, even though she's a bit reluctant at first.
Yeah, so they kind of got her there, and she's being quite quiet, but Ripley, of course, forms a bond with her, having lost her own daughter in the 57 7 years that she was in hibernation. So yeah, they set up this mother-daughter relationship between the two of them, which is great because of where we're going. Not to go too far ahead, but we're going to see the queen. So that's the mother of the aliens versus this mother, our Ripley. Yeah, it's a great setup. And of course, you know, we're going to get into the action as they go to find the colonists.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say too that this film is it's not just a straight up action film, it's a mystery. Like, I think the first half of this film, it's not all action and it's not all gun blazing. I mean, yes, you've got the military crew, but there's a mystery at its core, which is what happened to these colonists. And like, even though we know from kind of watching the film and knowing kind of what happens at the end, but for the first half of the film, you really don't know. So imagine you've never seen this film before and you're trying to work that out. So part of the mystery is what happens to these colonists. So thanks to the technology, Hudson, who's, I think he's meant to be like the IT expert amongst the military crew, because they keep giving him kind of IT orders and like go through the records and do this and do that and do this filter and do that filter and all that kind of stuff. And he actually locates the colonists, well, what looks like the colonists, because I think Burke mentioned something that all the colonists were actually implanted with like tracking devices before they were put on the station, which is very convenient from a story perspective. Of course, obviously those tracking devices would appear somehow, and they find them, and they actually notice that they're all supposedly grouped between the fusion-powered atmosphere processing stations. So once they kind of locate these supposed missing colonists, they decide to head to that location, descending into the corridors, which is actually covered in cocoons and various other kind of alien contraptions.
And then, of course, Ripley's onto it as well, because she notices that if they breach the walls or crack the containment unit, pretty much thermonuclear explosion and everybody will die. So as the Marines are heading in, they're already like deep into the structure. Suddenly they're being told they cannot use their guns and they cannot use their grenades. They can only use their flamethrowers. And I don't know, it's a weird scene when, you know, he gets on the radio and tells them not to do this, you know, collect up all the magazines and everything, make sure nobody's using their guns. He never actually explains to them why. So of course, like Vasquez and stuff have like backups. Hicks has a shotgun with him as well. So like, yeah, if he just explained why they can't use their guns, I think they would have been more hesitant to use it.
I really like that line though when Gorman issues it in, and all the Marines kind of freak out, and one of the guys who, I don't think he's a main player, I think he's like a bit part kind of Marine who we don't really hear from too much, and he says, what are we meant to use, harsh language? You know what I mean? I think that's a great line. It's a really kind of quite memorable line, and I did enjoy that. In hindsight though, as soon as they realise they can't fire their guns in this clearly dangerous situation, they should have just pulled them out straight away, and they should have regrouped and worked out like a B plan. They shouldn't have kept going. I mean, I think that also kind of feeds into the inexperienced nature of Lieutenant Gorman, who really doesn't have much of a clue about how to lead a team like this or the technicalities behind the things. And you can kind of see Ripley and Gorman getting frustrated heavily.
Pretty much immediately, the aliens start attacking, and it's those great visuals, you know, they're hidden in the walls and stuff like that. They sort of blend with their surroundings because they've sort of cocooned the place. Of course, before that, they do come across a survivor who immediately has the alien burst out of her chest.
Doesn't she say, like, immediately, like, kill me now kind of thing, you know?
A reoccurring thing. We did see Tom Skerritt in the first movie saying that. Kill me.
Just kill me, I'm done. Yep.
And of course they use the flamethrower because they've been told not to use their guns. And it's this commotion that sort of brings all the aliens to them. And they blend into their surroundings really well, so they can't see them. And Hudson's freaking out. You know, what can I tell you? They're everywhere. We've got movement. It's not us. They're coming at us.
Yeah.
And they pretty much just take out the majority of these Marines.
Oh, yeah, totally. And as far as movie mistakes are concerned, the fact that Gorman didn't pull the team out straight away is a major mistake, because in this kind of instance, they lose several of the team straight away. Like, I think Apone dies in that situation too, doesn't he? Like, I think he gets taken away, and various kind of other crew members kind of get killed as well, and they immediately retreat after being attacked by the aliens, and they're like totally A-grade kind of freaking out, aren't they?
Yeah, the only survivor survivors are Hicks, Hudson, and Vasquez.
And keep in mind, too, the only reason that they were able to survive is because Ripley took control of the situation, and she actually commandeered the vehicle at the base station where she was with Gorman, and she actually drives to the entrance or whatever, wherever the rest of the team were, to actually rescue them. And she was actually able to kind of get rid of them. And that, I think that's actually a pretty great scene, actually. I like that action sequence. I really kind of enjoyed it, yeah?
Yeah, her busting in there in the vehicle, saving them, and then getting out. And even Hicks has to tell her to stop. Like, you've blown the tires out and everything. Look, we're away. Just stop the car.
Yeah, because she's just running on adrenaline, isn't she?
Yeah, so they call up the dropship to come and pick them up. And immediately the pilot of the dropship is taken out by an alien. So that just crashes. And
yeah.
So now they're stranded there as well. So we're set up. We're in this thing. We got hundreds of aliens around us. What are we going to do?
We then end up with the three survivors, the Hicks, Hudson, and Vasquez. Obviously, Ripley and Burke and Bishop are still around as well. And there's this great scene between Ripley, and they're trying to come up with, like, okay, how do we get out of this situation? What's the best plan of attack? They're all throwing up suggestions, and Ripley actually says, I think we need to retreat to orbit and nuke the facility. It's the only way we'll know. I think I'm actually backtracking slightly, but there's that really great scene where Burke actually points out that, hang on a second, I'm not too sure that this is the best course of action. It's just not really in the company's interest. There are $1 million at stake, and this is not a wise financial decision. And he's approaching the conundrum and the problem from a very different angle, very opposite to the concept of just straight up survival. Like, it's clear that Burke, his agenda is kind of starting to kind of see the light a little bit than what it was earlier in the film. Ripley actually says, well, hang on a second, Burke, you're not in charge. I believe this is a military expedition, and if the Sergeant Apone died, the next person in charge is actually Corporal Hicks, who turns into Sergeant Hicks. Quickly, Michael Biehn makes a decision, or Hicks, I should say, makes a decision to go into orbit and nuke the facility. And as you said, that's when they call in the chopper, or whatever it is, the pilot, who and that's when she dies, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So, and it also quickly comes out too that Burke is the one responsible for all this now in the first place. After Ripley told her story, of course, the board sort of threw her aside. Burke was the one who went, if I send people out there and they find this stuff and we are able to get this alien to the weapons division, I will have millions and millions of dollars. And yeah, he was keeping it secret, and Ripley sort of throws this back in his face. He tries to turn her around, to which he's just like, are you freaking crazy, man?
Yeah, totally. And like,
I am not with you on this.
Doesn't he kind of say something like, you don't have the right to exterminate these people? And he tries to use that angle. Like, he's just so totally devoid of any reality. I think it's hilarious that he's actually driven by money, of all things. Like, really? Like, it's just money? Like he's kind of willing to put all these people's lives at danger to get this alien that you clearly can't control in any way. Like, this is not the kind of thing that you can just put into captivity and tame. I don't think it quite works that way. She actually threatens to expose him, but Bishop informs the group of actually a greater danger, because the power plant was actually damaged by the dropship crash, which happened moments earlier, and will soon explode with the force of a 40 megaton thermonuclear weapon. This is the point where Hudson really starts freaking out, doesn't he? Absolutely A grade, just doesn't cope whatsoever.
Hey, look. The Sarge and Dietrich aren't dead, man. Their signs were real low, but they ain't dead.
Then we go back in there and get them.
Fuck that.
We don't leave our people behind.
I ain't going back in there.
You can't help them. You can't. Right now they're being cocooned just like the others.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
All right. We got 7 canisters of CN20. I said we roll them in there and nerve gas the whole fucking nest.
That's worth a try, but we don't even know if it's going to affect them.
Look, let's just bug out and call it even, okay? What are we talking about this for?
I say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Fucking A.
Oh, hold on 1 second. This installation has a substantial dollar value attached to it.
They can bill me.
Okay, look. This is an emotional moment for all of us, okay? I know that. But let's not make snap judgments, please. This is clearly an important species we're dealing with, and I don't think that you or I or anybody has the right to arbitrarily exterminate them.
Wrong.
Yeah, watch us.
Hey, maybe you haven't been keeping up on current events, but we just got our asses kicked, pal.
Look, I'm not blind to what's going on, but I cannot authorize that kind of action. I'm sorry.
Well, I believe Corporal Hicks has authority here.
Corporal Hicks is...
This operation is under military jurisdiction, and Hicks is next in chain of command. Am I right, Corporal?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Look, Ripley,
Yes.
This is a multi-million-dollar installation, okay? He can't make that kind of decision. He's just a grunt. No offense.
None taken. Pharaoh, do you copy?
Standing by.
Prep for dust-off. We're gonna need immediate evac.
Roger. On our way.
Say we take off, nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
And Ripley really has to be like, will you just shut up? We need to think about this. We need to figure out how we can get out of here. And they come up with a plan, but it's like a really tight deadline and everything has to go according to plan. And it actually hinges on Bishop getting over and realigning a dish.
Yes.
So he can make contact with the Sulaco.
Yes.
And have the secondary dropship automatically come down to pick them up. And then he would have to fly over and pick them all up. So it's like a very tight deadline. He has to crawl through this pipe thing and get over there and then do all his work and get it all going. So that's kind of the plan. But in the meantime, there's still all these aliens out there.
There's obviously like aliens, as you say, still running around causing problems for the rest of the survivors. Ripley and Newt actually fall asleep in the medical laboratory, awaking to find themselves locked in the room with two face huggers, which I can only assume are the fake huggers from the tanks that they just found earlier in the film. Ripley actually triggers a fire alarm to alert the Marines, who rescues them and kills the creatures. Ripley accuses Burke of actually releasing the facehuggers so that they would impregnate her and Newt, allowing him to smuggle the alien embryos past Earth's quarantine, and of planning to kill the rest of the Marines in hypersleep during the return trip so that no one could contradict his version of events. It's a pretty ghastly plan when you actually think about it. Yeah, like it's pretty cold. Yeah,
and they're pretty much ready to just execute the guy. Like, there's just so much evidence against him where they're just like, this is ridiculous. Let's just kill this guy and get out of here. We don't have to tell anybody. You know, it's the same thing, really. Like, if we kill this guy, who else is going to know about it?
Oh, yeah, totally. And I think he kind of gets his own. He keeps running away, doesn't he? And he keeps, like, closing doors and securing them so the rest of the team kind of can't get through them. But thanks to Ripley and Hicks's ingenuity through the vents and whatnot, they're able to kind of bypass whatever kind of barriers he kind of places. But I'm pretty sure Burke kind of gets his own, doesn't he? Doesn't he get picked up by an alien at some point?
Closing a door on Ripley just to turn around and find that the room is full of aliens. But that's actually a great scene of them trapped in this room, and Hudson's got that motion detector, and he's sort of like saying, like, 10 meters, 9 meters, 7 meters. That means they're in the room. What the hell?
Yeah.
They should be coming in through the ceiling, and you're like, oh shit, this is crazy. It's such a good scene.
It kind of amazed me that they didn't think of that earlier on, that they could be above them. It's possible, but that's okay. Before the Marines can kill Burke, the electricity is cut and aliens assault through the ceiling, which we just mentioned. Hudson, Burke, Vasquez, and Gorman are all killed, and Newt is actually captured. So yeah, that's a big deal, man. That's a big body count, like right there, isn't it? Hudson, Burke, Vasquez, and Gorman all get their own by the alien, like in that sequence. So we lose quite a few. Ripley and an injured Hicks actually reach Bishop in the second dropship, but Ripley refuses to abandon Newt. She's very attached to this little girl, and rightly so. She needs to kind of take care of her. She's totally innocent. The group actually arrives at the processing station, allowing a heavily armed Ripley to enter the hive and rescue Newt. And I think we kind of mentioned early, like last week, about just how rock solid an action hero Ripley is. Like, she's just great, isn't she? Like, she's so brave, and there's nothing kind of gets in her way, and when she talks you listen, and like you can tell she's in control, and she's great. Like, I think Ripley, she's not just one of like the best female action heroes. I think she's just stone cold one of the best action heroes in modern cinema.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, when she gears up and she goes back in there, and Newt has this little tracker on her. Hicks originally gave it to Ripley.
Yeah.
And she gave it over to Newt, and she tracks it in just to find it, laying on the ground there. And she just like breaks down. Like she's just ready to lose it. But then there's all these eggs in this chamber, and
like hundreds of eggs.
Yeah, and Newt's like up against the wall, sort of like half cocoon, and she starts screaming, and immediately Ripley just runs in there to save her, only to find that the two of them are in the alien queen's lair.
What did you think of the alien queen?
I think it's cool. It's a cool idea.
Yeah, I think it's cool, but I'm going to revert back to my point that I made a while ago about possibly getting H.R. Geiger involved a little bit more, because something that I kind of noticed about the making of Alien was the way Scott shot the alien. Like there was a lot of close-ups, and there was a lot of, like, you never really got the sense that Alien was just a puppet or just a man in a suit or whatever it might be. But this, especially, I thought the Alien Queen, truthfully, Corey, and this is just my opinion, I thought it looked a little silly. Truthfully,
the movement wasn't as good.
No, it wasn't, was it? And I'm right in saying that. I think it was trying to be a little bit more ambitious than the previous film, which is fair enough. I mean, you're trying to up the ante a little bit with how the film is made and what the alien is capable of and all that kind of stuff. But I did struggle a little bit with the alien queen herself. I just thought it just looked a little silly. I didn't really feel the menace.
You could almost get away with it when they first see her, because, she's got this big, like, lava sack. But, after Ripley sort of lays fire to the entire nest, and the alien queen breaks off that sack and has to, like, run after her and become, the main villain for the big climax, she's a bit too big, and the movement just doesn't seem as fluid as we've seen with the other aliens.
Definitely not. And I think the mystique of the alien that was so clear in the first film, and part of what makes it so great, was perhaps a little lost with this one. There was a few too many, like, full-on wide shots. In saying that, though, the scene where Newt, and again we're backtracking slightly, the scene where Newt is going through the water underneath the floors or whatever it is, and you see the alien rising behind her, that is a wonderful shot. It looks great.
Yeah, definitely one of the iconic and creepier shots of the movie.
So where are we? We're pursued by the Queen, and Ripley and Newt rendezvous with Bishop and Hicks on the dropship. All four escape moments before the station explodes, with the colony consumed by the nuclear blast. And from our character's perspective, they think they're free and clear, don't they?
It's almost a redo of the original in a way.
Yeah,
I mean, like when she gets out there and the dropship's not there, and she's just cursing Bishop.
Yeah.
She just immediately goes to that goddamn Bishop.
Yeah, that's it.
It has to have been him. But then, the alien queen comes up and Bishop comes back in to save the day, and they get away. But then once they're back on the Sulaco, it's pretty much what happened at the end of the last movie, right? The alien queen had hidden away underneath the ship and sort of come back with them, and then comes down just to attack again. So, it's very, very similar to what happened at the end of Alien.
He's gonna be all right. He's just out. I had to give him another shot for the pain. We need a stretcher to carry him up to medical.
I'm sorry if I scared you. That platform was just becoming too unstable. I had to circle and hope that things didn't get too rough to take you off.
Bishop, you did okay.
I did?
Oh, yeah.
kind of upped just a little bit because you've got that iconic sequence with Ripley and the airlock, and she uses the contraption that is introduced very early in the film. I think there's a part where the Marines are setting up for the trip and they're in like some cargo bay, and Ripley sort of says to Sergeant Apone, do you need me to do anything? And he says, well, what can you do? And she points to one of those mechanoid kind of lifters.
Yeah.
And
I think she calls it like a loader or something.
A loader, that's it. And she goes, I'm pretty handy with one of those. And he says, by all means. And she jumps in I think they all get a bit of a laugh out of it, don't they? Don't they like have a good laugh about like how good she is in it? And that comes back into play right at the end. She jumps into one of the loaders and she does that great line. She's in the loader, and doesn't she say something like, get away from her, you bitch, or something like that?
Get away from her, you bitch.
Yeah, exactly.
Best line in the movie.
Yeah, it's a great line, isn't she? And she says it with total sincerity. And so there's a bit of a fight sequence. The alien queen somehow gets pushed towards the airlock. Again, you're dead right, man. It's almost like a carbon copy of the first film with what they try to achieve. And next thing you know, Sigourney Weaver's trying to open the airlock. The alien gets sucked out of it. Meanwhile, Bishop has been ripped in two and is half alive on the factory floor, and or half dead, I should say. They close the airlock after the alien gets thrown out into space. Close the airlock. Newt, Ripley, Hicks are all safe.
Well, I have to say at this point, is it weird that Hicks survived? I mean, they kind of set up a friendship between Ripley and Hicks. Nothing really romantic about it, really. I mean, I think he just kind of really respects her.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think it's based out of respect, isn't it?
Yeah. So I understand why they had him survive. Like, they didn't want to have everybody die. But, for this big climax where Ripley has to face off against the alien queen, it's awfully convenient that even though Hicks survived, he was knocked out by Bishop, who gave him, some anesthetic or something to ease his pain, so he passed out, so he's just asleep up wherever in the med bay.
Doesn't he get like acid thrown on him accidentally, and he's got like severe kind of burns on his skin and stuff? But you're right, like it's fine that he survived, but if he died, I don't think it really would have mattered all that much.
He does nothing in the climax of this movie. He's literally asleep.
He's a passive. Yeah, that's exactly right. So that is basically where the film ends. I think they go into hypersleep and roll credits. This film is directed by James Cameron, shows up, and that's kind of that.
Well, again, they mirror the first movie, but instead of just a slow look of Ripley asleep in her hyper pod, you also get Newt asleep right next to her, a nice little thing. I think Newt even calls her mummy or something like that.
She does.
She saves her,
yeah.
So it's like, Ripley's got her daughter back now. The two of them are together, and they go into hypersleep and they're headed back to Earth. They can have good dreams. It's a nice little ending.
And then on to Alien 3.
Which we won't get to for a few weeks.
No,
but
that's right.
Before we get too far into that. Ratings recommend? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, this is clearly another strong recommend. I don't think it's quite as good as Alien, but I think it's a very different film. This is a militaristic action film, with Alien and Ripley in it. I love this. I've always loved this movie. Upon reflection and upon reviewing it, I don't think it's entirely perfect. If I had to give it a rating, I think I'd probably give it like 8.5 bishops out of 10. I think it's kind of where I'm at, 8.5, 9. Like this is considered an action classic, and for good reason. Like, it's a great film directed by a master craftsman. It's a strong recommend. Very rarely do you have sequels live up to the original, and this is one of the earlier ones too, and it totally lives up to it. So yeah, what about you, mate? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you. This concept of sequels that are as good as their originals, this is one of those exceptions to the rules, because this is an outstanding sequel and definitely holds up against the original. But I still think that original is the best of all the Alien films, not to show my hand too much as we get into our discussion. But this one, the genre is a little different. Yeah, it's military, it's action, it's not the horror suspense of the first one. But, I gave that first one a 10 out of 10. That's on my short list of 10 out of 10 movies. This one, it's got its problems, and they're very minor. They're very minor.
Yeah,
James
I
Cameron
agree.
is
Totally.
a master craftsman. So, I'm more than happy to give this like a 9.5.
Nice.
Assholes and elbows.
Nice.
Okay, so next week we're actually on to Predator, the first Predator, 1987.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch this one. This is another good film and a very different film. So, yeah, stay tuned. That's it for this episode of the Rewatch Podcast. Keep up with listener interaction by joining our Facebook page at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast, or follow the show on Twitter at RewatchPod, and visit our webpage, rewatchpodcast.podomatic.com.
And I will just remind everybody, I kind of feel obligated to remind everybody up until we actually make the change, but we are going to be moving away from Podomatic at one point, not quite meeting our hosting needs, and we have quite a lot of episodes in our back catalogue now, so we kind of just need to move somewhere where we can have our entire feed stored so everybody has access to everything we have.
And we're closing in on towards 100 episodes. It's There's a lot of content.
Yes. But remember, you can always write us an email and record voice messages. Send them over to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. And also, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a rate and review on iTunes. We love 5-star ratings, but, we take 4. But
yeah, 4's okay. Yep.
Also take a moment just to write something nice.
Yes, exactly.
And, of course, you can always help support the Rewatch Podcast by heading over to patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast and making a monthly contribution as little as $1. And we kind of neglected our Patreon a bit. We kind of put it out there as to sort of test the waters to see how it goes. But I think we're paying a little bit more attention to it now, so we keep updates. And of course, we're up on YouTube. So
we are.
Search Rewatch Podcast and subscribe today. Thank you for joining me for Aliens. Really looking forward to next week's Predator.
See you next week for Predator.
Yeah, so until next time, I don't know if you're keeping up with current events, but we just got our asses kicked, man.
Game over, man. Game over.
The Rewatch Podcast is not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended. The use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided in Title 17, aka Fair Use. Music provided by Kevin McCloud at incompetech.com. Copyright 2016, The Rewatch Podcast. Hi, Rewatch Podcast listeners. I'm Corey.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Nathan.
First off, let me say that we have all had a blast doing the Rewatch Podcast. Every week, we put out another episode for free for you. And although we enjoy these discussions with each other, we truly do this for you guys out there in podcast land.
That's right, Corey. But we are here today to tell you about Patreon. Every week, there are costs involved in podcasting about film and television, including hosting and bandwidth charges, our own personal internet usage, and film or show rentals and purchases. So, we're asking you to become a Patreon supporter.
If you can afford as little as $1 to throw our way per month, it would really help us keep the lights on. And if you want to send $100 our way every month, we wouldn't turn that down either. But it's your choice, and we appreciate the support you bring.
As always, we strive to bring you the best quality shows we can create, and we hope that you enjoy them. So head on over to patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast to become one of our patrons and show your support for the Rewatch Podcast.
And if we get enough patrons, we may even be able to produce exclusive content just for the supporters in the form of simply getting episodes before the main feed release, or even bonus film discussion episodes as a thank you for your support. The website again is patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast.
Thanks, everyone.